Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Midweek with Meaning. This is Angela Ward. I am a registered nurse and soul midwife. I help people to journey within and return renewed, refreshed, maybe finding a new way to be on your path and more wholeness. As you're coming on, please say hello in the comments. Let me know where you're watching from. And if you watch a replay, please put replay in the comments. So that helps me just to see what you're up to, where you're coming in from. Last week, our Midweek with Meaning episode was about death, which I got a lot of feedback about. So thank you for those of you that sent me private messages. I know that it's an intense topic and one that is really important to share and talk about. So I appreciate those messages that I received privately. And we're going to be talking about grief today, which is kind of an extension of death in a way, although not always necessarily related to death. So I just, first of all, want to remind you that you have autonomy. If what I'm talking about here is activating you in some way, please know that you're able to take care of yourself in whatever way you need. So remember bringing your breath in. If this is like right at the cusp for you, take some breaths, drink some water, do what you need to do to care for your heart. Because I think we're carrying a lot of grief on this planet right now. I think a lot of people carry a lot of grief for a lot of reasons. But today, I'm wanting to dial in a bit more to those grief experiences that are really related to the loss of another person or a pet. I think pets are equally as intense to grieve the loss of, as well as transitions that people are going through. So maybe you've experienced a health transition of some kind. That means that you've had a loss of your capacity in some way, or perhaps you're grieving a relationship. So I just want to preface this by saying that this is not, again, a competition. This is not a grieving competition that my pain is worse than your pain or my loss was, more significant. It's not about that. There are many, many different ways we can experience grief and that we can experience loss. Like for some people, they may have a pet or a family member that dies that they actually feel relief around. I mean, that they might actually not feel grief about. And then other people may experience aging and find that really intense as a grieving process. So just to be clear, this is not like yours is better than mine or anything like that. Like I'm asking you instead for you to connect to that experience that I think is very much universal. I think it's part of our human family, and other animals do also express some grief. So just to remind you, you have sovereignty to tune in, and that, again, it's not a competition. So there's two arenas that I'd like to speak to today. One is about how to work with grief if you are the grieving person. And the other part is to talk about how to support somebody that is grieving. So before I dive in too deeply, I want to share just a little bit. I shared a bit in the show last week that I've been close to grief and death a lot in my life and experienced a lot of transition and loss. Last week, I had a photo of my daughter on my desk here, but I took her off because that photo is for me and not necessarily for you. So I want to say that I have the authority to speak about this in that I've had a lot of these experiences personally, as well as I've spent a number of years as working in perinatal bereavement as a nurse. So I've worked at the bedside with families losing all kinds of situations. So, And some of these things that I'm sharing with you are what I've observed. And in running a support group, I ran a perinatal loss support group for a number of years. And there's a lot that I can see that comes through that work that I think is relatable. So let's talk first if you are a grieving person. If you are the one in grief, uh, welcome. Welcome to your human family. And when you are grieving, I just want to hold you lightly with so much love because it is such a tender and potentially confusing place to be. Complicated, right? It's like, let's say we're talking about the death of a family member that perhaps was sick for a while and that their passing is a relief in some ways, but it's also really challenging to imagine perhaps moving forward how the world might look without their presence. And so we can hold this paradox of feeling of relief and confusion and angst and sadness and joyful memories and painful memories. So it is important to understand that if you're in grief, that truly your brain is operating in a different way than normal. So if you've ever lost anybody and you feel like you are tripping, you kind of are. I should have pulled up some information about how what the brain is like in grief, but it's truly operating in a different way than our baseline way of being. When I have experienced grief, it's one thing that I notice that shifts the most profoundly is the sense of time. Time has a very, very different perspective. I listened to someone recently describe this as being in the blast radius of grief. And there's kind of this like temporal shock wave that happens when you're close to that experience. So if you're in that space right now, I really, like I said, hold you with love there. And I just want you to know that that is really normal and it's really weird and it's going to be okay. We're going to get through it. In that first period of grieving, what happens is because people get into this timeless, weird time state, like you don't maybe know what day it is, like things really blend into each other. It's one of the first things that falls off for us is taking care of ourselves. And it gives me just tears to think about it, actually, because in a way, it's like because our brains are working so differently and our hearts are broken, we can often forget just the basics of eating or drinking water or getting out of bed or changing your clothes or taking a shower. Just like that basic stuff just blows away. It just blows away. And it's also very difficult when one is grieving to fall asleep in grief and then to wake up to the reality of the continued grief. That is really agonizing. So it's essential, even though it's so difficult, but to really try and be soft with yourself with no expectation of how you should be feeling. Okay. Because you're going to be all over the roadmap. You're going to be feeling you might actually be feeling okay for a moment. And then I've seen and I've experienced when I start feeling better, then you feel like an asshole because you should be grieving, So it's okay if you have those little moments of respite. It doesn't mean that you're forgetting your beloved, your loved one, your pets. It doesn't mean you're forgetting that stuff. It just means that that pressure is shifting a little bit and it's going to ebb and flow. And that's wonderful. But one of the things you can do that'll really help is to start building back in some structure. It may be really difficult to do, but making sure that you do that basic self-care, like getting yourself to bed at a really regular time, getting up at a regular time, finding ways to at least meet food and water, like at a regular time. So it's kind of set up that you don't have to think about it, that you just do it. Another essential piece that I think is really important is to get outside. So when people are close to a grief experience, oftentimes they get kind of frozen in that, if you know what I mean. If you've ever experienced this, please raise your hand, where it's just kind of like the shockwave has got you kind of locked down and maybe numb or just like disconnected. One of the best things I ever did, and that the families I've worked with ever did, was just to get the fuck outside. Just to walk for a moment, to get some air, maybe go sit by a body of water and just allow that change of scenery, especially if you can get closer to nature. Somehow it puts it a little bit in perspective. It's so strange, but there's something very soothing, I find, to our nervous systems to be just to get out there for a moment. Now, I'm not saying these things because I think it's important for you to get over your grieving experience. And I want to be really clear that anyone that is grieving, there is no rule to how you grieve. There's no rules. The only request that I have, and this is not a rule, but it's a request, is please don't harm yourself, and please don't harm others, and please don't harm property. Do your best, right? I mean, I have to say that I punched a friend in the eye shortly after my daughter died, and that was pretty fucked up, and I felt really bad about it, but I was just kind of like, my brain wasn't working right. And I'm certainly not saying that we should do that, but that's the request, is allow your process at your own process and try not to hurt yourself or hurt others. So there's not a timeline. There does sometimes come a time where your grief may have transitioned into some depression or things like that. And that's where this next piece comes in, is I think it's essential, if you can, to get connected to support groups. One of the last things people want to do when they're grieving is they don't have any energy to do anything like reach out and find support groups and get connected. But I have to tell you that it is a fucking lifesaver. It is a lifesaver. When I was grieving the death of my daughter, I was connected from the hospital where she died to a parents' peer-led support group. And it was a lifesaver, 100%. It was like a lifeline thrown back to me to be like, oh my God, here's something I can grab onto with people that have a similar, they don't know my personal experience, but they have a similar experience, and they're kind of walking through this healing journey together. If you are thinking about, if you've lost a pet, or if you've lost a beloved parent or partner or sibling, there are groups all over the place that can kind of hold you in that path. And the people that are in those groups oftentimes are further down their journey, and they can see you when you're close to that blast radius of grief, and they can I don't know if hope is quite the right word, but I think for me, at times that I've been grieving, I didn't understand how life could ever be different, how it could ever not hurt this bad. So seeing other people that had been a little further down, like had maybe gone through like the first anniversary of the passing of that person, or like holidays and that kind of thing, they just would have a lot of supportive ideas and suggestions of how to get through some of that stuff. So getting connected to a support group is fantastic. I want to say everybody's got their issues with Facebook, but one thing that's Facebook's pretty great for is there are some really great groups on there of people that are offering support. One of the perinatal bereavement support groups I'm in has, I don't even know, hundreds of thousands of people. And when there's a fresh new person that comes in, like super close to their loss, people just surround that person with love. And I think that can be really helpful in those moments that we feel profoundly alone. So I'm sure there's a lot more I could offer for the person in grief, but I just want you to know that I see you and I love you, and one breath at a time, my friend. That's all you got to do, one breath at a time. And remember that a broken heart still beats, and that grief is often evidence of profound love. It is one of the ways that we learn even more about love. So now I'd like to speak to those of us that care for grieving people. And, there will be times in all of our lives when you are the grieving person and I'm supporting you, and that I'm the grieving person and you're supporting me. So there are ways we can do this. People need a lot of tenderness around this time and conscientiousness. When someone is grieving, it has the potential to really trigger the non-grievers, shit, to trigger it big time. Like your existential flare-ups, especially if we're talking about death, right? So what I'm trying to get at is, if you are going to support a grieving person, you need to check yourself first before you open your mouth. You need to understand why you're trying to support this person. Maybe they're a friend that you love and you want to just offer that connection, but make sure that it's not because some people get this kind of interesting grief porn. That's the only way I can describe it. Like, there's some people that really want to support people that are going through this process, and I'm not certain why exactly. I think it's a morbid fascination, maybe, or maybe a way for them to process their own things. So just be really clear, if you're supporting a grieving person, that you're not trying to get the gory details to kind of work with your own existential confusion. I hope that makes some sense. This isn't about you. If you're supporting a grieving person, it's not about you. People that are grieving are profoundly narcissistic. That's the point, right? Like, their pain is so intense that it's really all about their world. And that's okay. It's totally okay. We just got to love them and help them work their way through this. Okay. So there's a couple things that really you should do. So now that you're clear that it's not about you, and you're not going in there to console them by somehow consoling them. It's consoling you about your own discomfort with grief. Here's the things you do want to do. You want to ask how someone is doing genuinely, and then be solidly grounded and ready to hear what they have to say, without critique, without fixing anything, without doing anything. Like, if you ask someone who's grieving how they're doing and they're like, fuck, I just can't get out of bed, I'm really struggling, the most important thing that you can say is, I can only imagine what you must be going through. That must be really hard. You don't say things like, well, maybe tomorrow let's just get up, or maybe you could try a little harder. I've heard more than one person be told, more than one parent that has lost a child, that have been told by, I will say assholes, but really people who think they're doing well, will say to them, oh, well, you're young, you can still have another baby. And you guys, that doesn't matter. That's not the point. The point is that particular person, they're grieving that thing. So people that say things like that are saying that to have a release valve on their own discomfort around these feelings. So make sure you're checking yourself. Don't tell somebody, well, he's with God now, or things like that. The grieving person is the one that gets to lead with belief here. And it's absolutely okay for a grieving person to be existentially confused. Like, maybe they had no belief in an afterlife and now they do, or maybe they had a strong spiritual belief and now they feel like their spiritual belief has exploded. So we got to just allow that. It's okay for people to question all of these things and find their way back to piecing themselves back together. So when you ask how they're doing, make space to really listen, and just listen with your heart and see how you can love that person more. If you're speaking to someone about a death, use the person that has died's name. Talk about them. especially if this is somebody that you knew that has passed, remembering them for the loved one to be like, I was thinking about so-and-so the other day and remembering how they used to love to do blah, that just creates this opening that your sadness or you can relate a little bit, but also that person was a real person, that they existed and that you knew about them, or it allows people to then use their name. What else do I want to say about that? Keep coming back. If this is someone you're supporting and you love, keep coming back. It's going to take time for your grieving friend or partner, whoever it is, to find their way back to wholeness. It's a process. And a lot of people, like after the funeral or after the breakup or whatever, people like circle around right around that time. But as time passes, people kind of drift away. And it's when we get closer to like anniversaries and birthdays and holidays that oftentimes people feel a kind of an exacerbation of their grief again. So stay close, keep finding ways to reconnect, open-handed invitations that may or may not be taken up, but understand that that's just part of the brain, that person's heart repairing and their brain kind of coming back together. But the other thing I want to say about this is, if you are speaking to a grieving person and you ask how they're doing and they give you a clear, energetic, like, I'm fine, or I don't want to talk about it, believe them, okay? Don't dig, don't pry, don't say, well, I know you need to talk about it or grieve about it. Because sometimes when we're grieving, we need to just have a sense of a normal moment, or maybe not always being the one who just lost somebody, sometimes carrying that identity where people only relate to the grieving person as a grieving person, it can feel really intense for the grieving person. Like there's a light shining on them and that's the only person they are, as the person that's in grief. So I would really encourage you to just walk gently with a lot of love with people that are in grief. I feel like there's a lot more I can say on this topic. I'd like to open it up for any questions or comments if anyone has, if this is bringing anything up for you, or things you might know of, tips or tricks that kind of help with this. The main thing I want you to understand, though, is this is a normal part of the human experience. And grief can even extend beyond like just that interpersonal loss. There are people that are feeling a lot of sadness around our political system right now, or feeling a lot of sadness around the state of our planet. And that is legitimate grief as well. It's all okay. There's no need to just put on a happy face or value judge that we're doing better because somebody laughed or smiled or something, just gentle love. So I wanted to let you know, this month we've been talking kind of about ancestors, the veil. We've been talking about grief. We've been talking about death. And that's really in part with this season that we're in, around Halloween, around the Day of the Dead, around Samhain, and this holiday where, we mourn our beloved dead that have passed on. So in that spirit, next week, I will be having a guest speaker on Midweek with Meaning. I'd love you to join me. I think we might go over half an hour. We're just going to chat and see how long it goes. You're welcome to join for the whole time or tune in as you can. Her name is Kira Swenerton. I got her name right finally. Kira Swenerton. She's a dear friend that I have known for, oh my gosh, probably since the early 2000s. Yeah, probably 20 years. And she's just an amazing plant ally, ancestral healing person, magical being. And she is going to speak with us about welcoming the ancestors home and how we can use this season to connect with our beloved dead and create space for them, to bring in memory of them, to grieve, or even just celebrate some joy. Come next week, Midweek with Meaning, Wednesday at 10 a.m. for my talk with Kira as we talk about welcoming the ancestors home. But before we complete today, I would like to pull a card, of course, to give us a little perspective about how to contemplate grief and what that might mean. So I am, last week's card around death were discernment and efficiency, these two. So we're going to put them back in the deck and see who from the Sacred Earth Oracle would like to join us this week. How are you guys doing? I feel like a little bit of the tenders in my heart, and I have little drips and just a little. I don't feel like I'm like actively grieving a person, but oh my goodness gracious, like it's in the field, man. People are feeling it, and I think we got to make space for it and know that it's okay. It's okay. And I love you, even if you're grieving. Even if, of course, if you're grieving, I love you. Even when you don't feel your shiniest, perhaps. Yeah. So the Sacred Earth Oracle was gifted by one of my clients to me, and I made a promise to this deck that I would look at it regularly. So I've been enjoying picking a card here each week. I hope y'all can hear me okay. I just realized my volume was down a little on my microphone. All right. Card for the week related to death. Maybe this one. Isn't this one? Get out of there. Ooh. I've never gotten this card before. Okay, hang on a second. This is a card that says Alliance. Alliance. I think that's pretty interesting considering we're about to dive into connecting with the ancestors. So can you see it? Here, I'll put it in front of my face. Sometimes that makes it more focused. It looks like a Native American person with, I can't really tell gender, with a spirit drum with the 4 directions. Or it looks like the wheel, the medicine wheel. All right. That already sounds pretty amazing. The medicine wheel, Alliance. Let's see what this card has to say about death, about grief and our connection to grief. If I could spell it would help. Okay. Alliance. Diamond is the hardest natural mineral on our planet. Graphite is one of the softest. One is brilliant and represents perfection and love and adorns crowns. The other is dull and used in many everyday items, including pencils, brake linings, and batteries. Diamond is so hard that it is added to cutting tools, while graphite is so slippery it is used as a lubricant. Diamonds refract light and can turn it into rainbows. Graphite absorbs light and is black as night. Elementally, diamond and graphite are both pure carbon. They differ only in their structure. In graphite, the atoms bond in a 2-dimensional layer. In diamonds, the atoms bond in a 3-dimensional lattice to make connections on all sides, not just to their neighbors on the same plane. Valency, I'm not sure how to say it, refers to an atom's capacity for connection. Diamonds are durable because they use the valency of carbon to its full potential. Carbon's ability to bond in complex ways makes it central to cell structure and thus to all life. It is your connections that make you strong. Absolutely perfect. even in grief when you may feel your weakest. These connections are what make you strong. Connect to nature, the seasons, and your fellow passengers on this beautiful planet. Your ability to make diverse and involved bonds is life-affirming. Your ability to make diverse and involved bonds is life-affirming. So this grief, your grief is life-affirming, even though it may not feel like it. That's a beautiful sentiment from this card. Let's see what else it has to say real quick. Earthly meaning. Make the most of your network. Respond to pressure by reaching out to people of different levels of education, experience, age, views, or social standing. Be wary of pretension or selective equality. A challenge brings a reminder of the place you hold within a system, network, or group, and of the scope of your influence. Healing can be found within cohesive relationships or a close-knit group. Maybe you should come join the collective. Build strength through inclusion, structure, and connections. I really love that. That makes a lot of sense. Think in 3 dimensions of past, present, and future. This seems so aligned for moving through grief and for our upcoming talk next week. The spiritual meaning of this card: you are part of an amazing universe within and of creation, connected to and therefore with access to all of the colors of life's canvas. Including that grief color. It's intense. Mortal body, immortal soul, living many lives in endless forms throughout existence. You are in every breeze, every feather, and every part of the sunrise. That's a beautiful way to think of our beloveds that have crossed over, or if you are thinking of your own passing. Yes. You are the love that underpins all. Bring this connection to consciousness. Whew. These are pretty great cards, man. Yep, exactly. You are the love that underpins everything. How beautiful. All right, my loves, thank you so much for joining me. Please leave me some comments and let me know what you think. Please follow me on all the socials. So if you can, follow me on Instagram or like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. And I really look forward to our talk next week. I'd love to hear how this is connecting for you. Send me a message. All right. Thank you so much. Love you all. Bye.